welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today, continuing the series of talking to people in the Harrington Starr team, I am delighted to bring to you none other than our sales guru. It's Catherine O'Byrne. Catherine, how are you?
Hi, Toby. I'm fine, thanks. You?
Really good, thank you. Really good. Listen, lovely to have you on, and thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking all about the world of sales. It's been an area that was hit, last year, particularly by the pandemic in 2020. Over the back of the back end of the year and moving into 2021, we're seeing a very different picture with very confident sales predictions and a sudden sort of surge in sales hiring and requirements, which is really encouraging to look at. And we'll go into all the details of that. We'll have a look at some of the things people can do to stand out in competitive marketplaces. We'll look at some of the aches and pains that companies are seeing as they're looking to grow this year. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself, Catherine. What are you doing? What's your marketplace? And tell us a little bit about where you arrived today, heading up and spearheading the Harrington Starr sales effort.
Okay, thank you for the nice introduction, Toby. Very much so appreciated. So I've been at Harrington Starr now for 3 years, 3 and a bit years. I joined on the sales desk to cover the UK market as well as Europe, where I would focus on mid to senior level hires around sales, account management, marketing, pre-sales, customer success. So anything that falls within the commercial team is where I would, I suppose, hang my hat up and run at. Yeah, so I've grown with the business. I think when I joined Harrington Starr initially, I hadn't a clue what the financial markets were. Like my I suppose interactions with it was going into Barclays Bank to open up an account, and that's as far as it went. But yeah, so I've been trained hopefully very well. I'll leave you be the decider of that one. But I've been trained in the financial markets and also trained in how to source exceptional sales and talent for companies that I currently work with across startups all the way through to your more larger financial technology providers. As of recently, I am very pleased to say that I am spearheading the sales desk. So it's my responsibility, I think, to pick up where I think it's been running for 6 years. I think the sales desk, hasn't it? So yeah, I've got big boots to fill from my former manager. So that's where I'm at now, and hopefully I can do the desk justice and proud, and hopefully grow that out into, I suppose, more geographies and start building it out in terms of headcount as well.
That's very, very modest in terms of what you were saying there, because look, I remember going back to it. It's been an incredible 3 years for you, and I think if you go back to your first year, from coming in with that sort of level of knowledge, sort of limited understanding of the financial markets, to finishing that year being voted Recruiter Magazine's most inspiring newcomer in the industry, which I thought was fantastic. Immediately hitting the ground running, and I think it's down to that sort of real desire from you to network, to be authentic, and to understand and find solutions for your customers and candidates alike. And I think that's worked really well for you over the last few years, where we've seen you sort of really add tremendous value to the marketplace and industry. And from my perspective, I can think of no one better to be pushing that further forward. And as you say, ambitious plans for us this year to really take that further forward. I spoke at the start there, Kath, about the marketplace and what's happened, and we obviously saw some contraction and conservatism over the course of 2020, where people just sort of held the brakes a little bit with sales, as people were looking to see, right, how can they get in front of people, what can be done, etc. And then over the course of the back end of last year, as people recognized that this wasn't going away quickly, but there were still quotas and opportunities and people buying, etc., that sort of tended to have a little bit more of a release of the handbrake and some hiring within the sales space. So as we move into this year, talk to us about what you think some of the big trends and where the sort of movers and shakers are going to be, what you're anticipating, your sort of mystic Kath, crystal ball looks like for the sector.
Yeah, so I believe digital transformation will be massive, I think, this year for the tech community, because if you look at last year and where everything was at, companies always say how agile they are and how quickly they can adapt and everything that's in place for that, and how slow some of those companies were. when you take into consideration as well the remote working, so a lot of, I suppose, where I would focus on is compliance. And compliance, if you can't monitor your employees, is quite hard to keep track of. So I think a lot of what's happened throughout COVID has pushed digital transformation, brought on digital transformation much quicker than we actually anticipated. So I think from speaking to a lot of companies, let's say in the middle and back office space as well, which is one of the areas I focus on, they have said that this is going to be a very good year for them because of the banks having to source new technologies and new solutions to streamline and enhance their back-end processes. So I do think that would be a massive growth area this year. Also, I think AI and predictive behaviors. So there's a lot of companies that I've been working with that have the abilities to read whether someone's going to make a decision in a particular way, and then I suppose kind of help and enable their salespeople to engage in a far more accurate way with potential clients. I think that's been around, for years. But I think now as well, that's definitely going to come to the forefront of where it's at, because I think it's exciting. It's an exciting way that people can do business, but then you also have companies saying they do have these capabilities and don't have them at all. So I think we'll probably see a lot more of that as well, where you can really, really, really delve into a company and understand what it is that they do. But overall, I think the market's going to move in a far more exciting way. I think 2020, yes, it did plummet. It grounded to a halt. I think the first, like you said, the people that took a hit were the salespeople. And if the banks aren't buying, or the asset management firms aren't buying, then you don't need salespeople, unfortunately. That's because salaries are quite good, and some companies only want people that will just do the deal as opposed to building the relationship, which we all know is the better way to do business and sales. But it took a massive hit, and as it got towards September, October, companies have realized, like you said, it's not going anywhere. We don't know when we're going to come out of this, and you need to act now, or else your company's rocket nosing, what's that phrase I'm trying to find, diving into plummet. That's the one. That's probably why I should read more. Plummet into the ground, because the revenue needs to come in to keep the business afloat. It's it's a fairly simple model. So it's ramped up massively. Companies are now really after injecting a massive amount of energy and time into hiring people, especially on the sales, because what is lost last year has to be made up this year. Yeah. So targets will obviously probably be higher. The work pace needs to be much faster, and obviously not missing anything along the way. But it is going to be a very aggressive growth year for companies in the tech space.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it's been something that's been very interesting to see. Companies took that decision straight away to not oversell at the start. They wanted to add value, and marketing teams came to the fore a lot to add that value to it. And there was probably quite a lot of internal upgrade selling and internal selling and upselling that we saw, but less sort of new logo and new business wins at that sort of stage. For the more established companies, I think those more agile companies were starting to have wins on a smaller basis, and we saw a more fragmented marketplace that was starting to come through on that. And those who were investing in their sales teams, to me, started to see to move forward a little bit. But it did leave this sort of really interesting position. This is a very interesting piece for me to look at, because there were natural cuts in sales team across the sales teams across the fintech space. That's left is this sort of big pool of people, salespeople who are on the marketplace, and that represents a challenge for two reasons. Number one, because when the market's open, all these guys are going to be looking for opportunities again, and there's enhanced competition for those sort of places. But number two is I'm speaking to a lot of people, and I'm sure you are the same, who are saying what they don't want is people who are necessarily out of work at the moment, or who've been impacted by the coronavirus. They want to see the best people who've managed to sell all the way through this, and that creates challenges for both the hiring companies to access and stand out for that talent, but also the candidates to say that there can be very valid reasons why they're out of work, but it can be a difficult thing to rebuild that sort of confidence in them as salespeople when they're in a marketplace against other people. So with that and what you're looking at, you look at CVs every single day and you're looking for the best talent for companies out there. What can a salesperson be doing right now to stand out in the marketplace and give themselves the best opportunity of finding a good job?
Funnily enough, I think salespeople are the worst people at selling themselves 9 times out of 10, which is you don't expect. I think one of the most common things that are missing from CVs is sales figures. It's like, it's great to see someone's experience and what they've done and what they've achieved, but when you're in sales, money talks. What have you done? How have you performed? And I always say, like, honesty is the best policy. Not everyone can stand there and say, oh, I've hit my quota or I've overachieved every year, because we all have to have a bad year sometime. And if you have, then brilliant, fair play. But I think sales figures is definitely a massive area that needs to be improved on a CV, and clear, because if someone's reading and reading and reading, I think there's some research that's been done that I read somewhere that people tend to switch off halfway down through a CV. So if you're not capturing someone's attention immediately by having your achievements, then you could be the best person for the job, but someone just might not be as interested. And like you said as well, the candidate pool in the market at the moment is far greater than the opportunities. So if you've got 15 to 20 people relevant applying for a role, you have to stand out from the rest. And I can assure you, not everyone will put sales figures on their CVs. And it's just, mind-blowing, because that's your sell. And it's something I've been seeing for years, which obviously we try and work with people on and work with them. But when I'm qualifying opportunities with hiring managers, the key things that they always say to me is achievements. I want to know what someone's done, because at the end of the day, when you're going to join a team, that hiring manager will have a quota attached to that team, and are you going to benefit or add in to that quota? And that's what they need to see. So as much as I can have a conversation and extract that information out and put it in front of a client, it does really help if it's on the CV already.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. It's amazing how people sort of hide their light under a bushel, so to speak, with it all, and that's when I look at CVs in that sort of space, that sort of clear attainment and highlights and giving that confidence. I think confidence, sales is hiring salespeople is very much about sort of winning that immediate confidence within it. And if people are seeing those facts and figures, particularly what we've just been talking about at the moment with the sort of stigma of being out of work during this sort of stage, they want to have something there where they can say, right, we're hiring an A player, we're bringing someone in here who's going to move the needle and has the potential and benefit to be able to do that. So whether that is over the last 12 months or historically, there is a track record of proven success. That sort of ability to to push that through is really, really key. What about the actual interview itself? What are people doing there to make themselves stand out when they're actually getting through to that face-to-face opportunity? What are people looking for as clients, and how do candidates give it to them?
If you've researched the company, I think a lot of people, I think that, again, I suppose I don't want it to sound a bit contradictory, because I've just said that salespeople are probably sometimes the worst at selling themselves, but also sometimes it can be a little bit overconfident. So you can just assume that you know all about the company because you might be in the same space, but in hindsight, you don't really know as much as what you thought you did. So research is definitely the business and what it is. But what hiring managers are looking for in the first call is whether you can keep them engaged for the first 10 to 15 minutes, because when you're cold calling a new logo or prospect, you've got 10 to 15 minutes to make an impression. So that would be the first key thing. And then it would be just about how you deliver yourself. It's really more of a get to know each other type of process in the beginning, because I think cultural fits, as much as the skill set's very important, I think cultural fits are starting to weigh up almost equal in businesses, especially ones that are growing quite aggressively. So you can bring someone in. I don't know, you had someone in once, I can't remember who it was, that was doing a talk for us on a lineup one morning, and he spoke about cultural assassins or cultural architects.
Damien Hughes,
Was that
author of
it?
the Barcelona
Right.
and High Performance podcast.
Yeah, so I remember that, and I think that's really starting to come into play as well. I think with businesses, they don't want people that are going to be there to, think they're the big I am, especially, and damage the culture. But it would be research whether or not you work well together. Can you really talk through your sales process? I think there's a very, very, very fine line between, not fine line, it's quite clear, I think, when you are in it, between solution-based selling and product sales. And a lot of people in the market, depending on what business you're in, the titles are always different. So you can have someone who's doing new business sales, but new business is into named accounts, so you've got new business sales into new logos. And saying you're a solution-based salesperson, when you sell a subscription that consolidates data, maybe it's different. So being able to discuss your sales process in detail and what it is that you feel makes you a solution or product salesperson, just relevant to the job, not veering off and waffling maybe a little bit like I am now. But that's what I would say, is just understanding that, and then finally closing it. As salespeople, we are responsible for, when you're on a call, because that could be your only chance of speaking with someone, not being pushy, but to know when should you follow up, when should you send an email or whatever you want to put in there. But that's always very important, and a lot of people will judge individuals, especially in sales, on whether or not they close the opportunity, and that's important. So if it's something that you like and you want to continue the process, then just let them know. I think it's always better to leave it on a positive, as opposed to sitting there and wondering, did I do well, did I not? I always look at interviewing a bit like dating, really. If you don't like the person, then get up and leave. Don't do that in an interview. But you just keep it as a positive, because if your mind starts running away with you and you don't know whether or not both parties actually enjoyed the conversation, then it could go more so on a negative way, as opposed to a positive. So I always would say close the opportunity, because 8 times out of 10 you might be judged on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said there is about this being on calls and videos, and it's a very different thing from being able to sell physically, on that face to face. So I think that preparation is absolutely critical, never more so. As you say, to show people who are more prepared, who've done their homework, who've researched properly and spent the time and care to do that. And people are looking for that. There's so few interviews that have happened over the last few years, over the last year, face to face. And the people who've been getting those jobs have generally sort of really worked very hard to showcase their sort of ability to go that extra mile. And again, presenting the facts, presenting their story, being really clear about the evidence of how they've gone through it, and rather than a sort of generic thing, their input into it, their numbers. And as you say, closing has been absolutely key. So there are definitely things that salespeople can do to stand out from the crowd, both in terms of their CV and their interview process throughout this. But there's also a lot of aches and pains for companies who are looking to grow through this sort of period as well. And one of the core, if you're looking at retention areas, developers, we're seeing a lot of movement in the development marketplace, but particularly there are companies there who find it very, very difficult to retain long-term, sales professionals. And there's a whole host of companies where you see, 1 year to 18 months on CVs of their sales teams. Now, some of that is the patience, and we know that particularly with Series A, Series B backed businesses, there's big churn in those sort of areas as they sort of stretch for bigger numbers. But there are an awful lot of pressures around, the aches and pains for those growing companies. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing there and what they can do as well. Your advice for those companies to make the right hire.
Yeah, I think don't just make a hire for the sake of making a hire. I find it absolutely mind-boggling. Like, obviously no badness on the people securing the roles, but I find it mind-boggling how you can look at a business. The average sales cycle for companies could be anything from 3 months to 12 or 18 months, depending on the complexity of the solution. But you'd have someone that you'd hire into a growing business who needs to make sales an individual that has changed companies every year for the last 5 years. It just makes no sense to me. So I don't understand how an individual looking at the companies and the average sales cycle, I think, across the market, how that person has one business enough to be hired and trusted with your business. I can't. I mean, I haven't researched it in depth, but my gut tells me it's may not be the best move. A bad hire can cost a company 2 years in sales, in my opinion, because it's depending on the tech that you're in, I think, as well. If you look at the regulatory and reg tech space, for example, it's a bit of a saturated market. Everyone's going after the one client base, and it's a competition either over who is the better, I suppose, person at building the relationship, what's the best solution, and who's the cheapest. Those are probably the three things. And if you get that wrong by putting the wrong person into that, you've lost a lot of money. And that could then be very detrimental to your business's growth in a very, very, very competitive market. So my advice would be is to not rush hiring. Like I said, some companies want to get bums on seats. It's about understanding what it is that you need to hire as opposed to just a hire. Because there is such thing as vanity growth. There's things of where we need to have someone in place because that person needs to be there, or you might lose budget. There's no point in spending money on someone if you're not 100% sure. When I work with companies, I always try and find out what it is exactly that they're looking for, and I suppose the ramifications of having these people on board and working with them to ensure we find the closest match possible. I mean, we don't always get the mirror match of what it is, because sometimes the mirror match doesn't work, eventually after going through it. But if you get it wrong, it's quite hard to claw back from it, or else you'll end up, especially if it's a cost thing that you're bearing in mind when you're making these decisions, you'll end up spending more money, and that's what will happen. So it's cutting the corners, which it happens more than we like to say it does. How do I think companies can do it better? I think know your interview process. I'm not saying people do it, but don't Google interview questions for salespeople. It has to be relevant for your company. I think some companies, if you look at the startups, they mightn't have a HR function, or they mightn't have an individual there that's trained in being able to recruit and engage new talent. And it's just about asking for advice from people, and not having this mentality that, oh, I know what I'm doing, I know what's best, because sometimes that little bit of input might help you. Definitely referencing people as well. I don't know, I'm sure companies do it, but knowing who you're hiring is quite important. And also a presentation. I've had people, go into processes that a process could be one stage, and do you know enough about that person in one stage? Of course, it's in everyone's interest to try and get it as fast as possible, but it's not the way forward. It's really understanding the people, get a presentation in place, have them speak to different areas of the business where they'll be interacting on a regular basis, around product knowledge or marketing. Just make sure it's a close, tight-knit type of process where people sit down, reflect, bounce notes off each other, and then go back in and go through any areas that were of concern. That's what I would say, and not just have one person meet the same person 3 times, which happens as well. So
and it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because there's this sort of an over-analysis paralysis that we see at various different stages. There's this indecision because with the numbers you've seen, you're quite right. It's a big decision, and it can cause significant damage to hiring velocity, I guess, and people's ability to do this if they get this wrong. And so you see companies there sort of dither around decisions and then lose out on talent at the same sort of stage. So you've got this sort of very strong sort of counterintuitive two elements. On one side, you want to make the right decision because it's damaging not to. On the other side, you don't want to be there and never be able to make a decision because you worry too much about the impact on it. So how do you get the best of both of those?
Trust me.
To be fair, though, you're absolutely right, isn't it? Because that is the job which you're there to do, to have that analysis and insight and be able to guide people to making the right decisions, which I guess is what you're there to do as a true consultant.
Yeah, but it gets of course, because I think the recruitment or the recruiters in this industry, some have a bad name, and obviously there's years and years and years of reasons why people might have come up with this idea that we're just maybe untrustworthy. We're not. I think when I work with a company and when I work with an individual, I put myself in their shoes, and I think, would I want someone really messing up my life, really? Because if you go into the wrong company, or if you are a hiring manager and you make the wrong hire, that will have a domino effect to you as a person in work and outside of work. So it's really like, when I tell a company, if you don't kind of move a bit fast, I know you want to hire this person, but like you say, you're kind of dilly-dallying of like, oh, do we want to, let's try and benchmark someone and get someone in through 3 rounds of bloody interviews in 2 weeks and keep this person there. And it's like, you'll lose them. So when I say you lose them, I mean you will lose them. I obviously try my hardest and my best to keep both sides informed, but it's just trust the person. But yeah, like that, it's an honest service, I think, in which I offer, or we offer as a business, and we work with you. It's like when we probably partner with companies that will place people into our business at Harrington Starr, we want that open, transparent dialogue of where it's at. And I think that is the most important piece. I think when you take out a recruiter, or let's say if you have someone that's applying directly, then not just saying it because it reflects well on the recruitment industry, but you lose that part. Can someone be honest? So let's say if you've got someone that really needs the extra £2,000, which when you like break it down, it's nothing in some regards, but you understand their needs and why they need that, and to be able to package that up and deliver that to someone in a non maybe embarrassing way sometimes, or I suppose, I think it's just trust who you're working with. And that's because it's not the same size fits all or same shoe fits all or whatever. It's very different. The problems that you'd have in hiring in a very large company like won't be the same as what you'd have in a startup. Like, I've worked with companies that have had an idea, that came to life and grown the business to 50 to 100 people now in 3 years, all the way through to companies that have 15,000 people globally. The problems aren't the same, very, very, very different, but the individuals 9 times out of 10 are the same. Everyone has different needs and wants, but there's always something, there's always a reason to why a lot of it happens. So I think just trust the recruiter.
There we go. Something which we don't hear enough of. So look, trust is built from expertise, and expertise is built from experience. And you've had 3 years there, working, as you say, with some of the smallest and rocket ships of clients up to the most established in the sector. You've got an incredible black book of the best sales talent and some of the the most inspiring companies out there in your world, in your remit, and one which you're looking to build out and grow even further. Tell us a little bit about where your sweet spot sits and who you can really be helping at the moment, Kev.
So company wise, I got, I suppose, thrown into the deep end about 2 years ago and got told to build a market. So I did. And I've been working with regulatory risk and compliance vendors in the UK, so London, but outside of London as well, and across Europe and the US. Actually, I've bought a few on over in the US. So that would be my sweet spot. So anything around open banking, as I like to call it, the fun and exciting tech. So that would be digital transformation, open banking, KYC, AML providers. I also do a lot around the front office as well. So I'm not saying that I don't work that area because I have got a track record in placing people, but my sweet spots and my most exciting spots, I would say, would just be around the regulatory risk and compliance space, which I think is a very exciting and evolving market. There's a lot of companies that I've been working with, like I said, since its inception. They've gone through rebrandings, they've gone through a whole host of problems and issues and everything, and have come out fighting. There's companies that I work with now that are receiving significant amounts of investment, up to 40 million US dollars in some cases, and it's just exciting to work with those types of businesses. So as much as my sweet spot is also working with the larger firms, I always say, and this is good or bad, whatever way you want to take it, depending on what ear you're listening through, is that I think the better opportunities and the more exciting opportunities for really passionate sales individuals and marketing, anyone that falls into the commercial teams, are with these companies that are growing, the Series A, Series B funded tech firms, because they've got so much opportunity. They're just structuring their sales, they're just structuring, what geographies they're going after, where they're setting up, and working with those companies very closely, speaking to the hiring managers on a very regular basis and understanding, like we talked about, the needs, the individuals, the cultural architects, and placing the right people into those businesses. That's where my sweet spot would be, and what I try and have enough of going on for people to kind of look at. So yes, that's it. The exciting technologies that are innovating,
exciting, all good words for us to be launching into 2021 with. So we come into the year with with much hope as to what can be happening, and so much potential, and we're definitely going to see companies there invest into their sales teams and sales talent. We've heard a little bit about your sort of sweet spot and some of the things that people are going to need to think about from both client and candidate perspectives in terms of what they look at this year. Who should be talking to you at the moment, Kath?
Everyone, really. No, I think, anyone. So if you're on the client side, so if you need help with attracting, engaging talent, if you want to find out what's going on in the market in terms of the businesses, kind of the movers and shakers, there's been a lot of acquisitions across this space and a lot more to come. So good talent is coming onto the market through that. But if you just want to know, what salaries are out there, what am I seeing over the last 3 months? Because a lot of companies have changed direction and changed focus to match, I suppose, the current conditions and climate. And if you're, of course, looking to hire, but if you just want some advice and anything like that, or just a conversation into how I could potentially help, then from a client perspective, definitely reach out to me. From a sales side, we always say the best people aren't looking, so I will find you. No, but just if you're looking, to see what opportunities I've got on. So I've got 7 really good opportunities that are going to be closing out in Q1 this year. So there's a lot of opportunities there that are very different to each other. But if you're like, I put a post out on LinkedIn there, that was last week or something, and it's like the common things of what people are saying to me so far this year is that their companies haven't innovated, their targets are sky high, even though it doesn't reflect what's achievable for the year ahead. So if you are in that situation, then please speak to me. And the thing is with me, not that everyone has had the chance to do it yet or know it, but like, I'll work with you for however long it might take to find you the right opportunity. So if it's not for now, then it's always good to speak for future. I think a relationship doesn't have to be a product, and more of a solution and service to where we can get and what you're looking for, really. So, but the only thing I can't do is move people between industries. That's just not what I can. So
it's always a challenge, isn't it, on that side? There's a lot of people who wanting to do it, particularly at the moment. But it's that depth of experience, I think, is something which which requires there's no shortcut to that in terms of what people are looking for. Look, I think there's some fact, and look, from what you just said, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier on, and to me, you are one of the the queens of LinkedIn as a platform. There's always good content that comes out from your feed, and there is a constant stream for sales professionals there to be looking at it and seeing some of the best examples of great job opportunities in the marketplace. So if you're not following her already, Catherine O'Byrne is someone who you need to be following on LinkedIn, and do that straight away. Kath, listen, it is always a pleasure, always great fun, and always great to hear your insight on what's happening in a really busy marketplace at the moment. So thanks for coming on the show. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Kath, thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.